Well, hello and welcome to three special programmes that Lorna and I are doing on the subject of prayer and fasting. It's an interesting diversion for us, Lorna.
It is. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago that we did 1 hour programme one evening on prayer and fasting, and I'm still as excited about doing a programme on prayer and fasting, maybe even more than I was then.
What really prompted today was that, 15 months ago, as a leadership, Howard and Leslie and Lorna and I went away to spend some time just praying and seeking the Lord. It was the beginning of the new year, wasn't it?
That's right. We were looking back on the old year and then looking forward to what God was going to do in the new year. And we said, well, we really felt that we had to wait on God to know what he was saying.
That's right. The year ahead, that particular year, 15 months ago, we got the general election coming, and so we knew it was a critical time for the nation. As a TV station, we'd got all sorts of decisions that we were seeking the Lord on, and we also knew that Revelation TV viewers had got needs. People write in every day and share some of the most terrible situations that we're in.
Yes, family situations, situations where they need healing, and we came to the position where we said something has got to break, yokes have got to be broken, and we decided to call everyone to pray and to fast.
That's right. And so as we challenged the viewers, we also said to our staff and indeed to ourselves, let's set apart 3 days to pray and to fast. And in preparation for that, Lorna and I just put some notes together. It came to about 4 pages, I think, or 5 pages, didn't it? And we were amazed that as we announced the fast that was coming up, viewers kept contacting the office and saying, please, could I have a copy of the notes? Could I have a copy? And in the end, something like 500 sets of notes went out to you. Maybe some of you who are watching today got those notes. And then the questions began to come in from the viewers. And it was clear that lots of people had wanted to fast for a long, long time, didn't really know how to do it.
No, they pushed it to the back of their mind because they didn't know. And so they emailed, they text, they phoned with all sorts of questions. So, and we started answering those questions in this 5-page booklet. But then...
Well, we've got some of the questions written down here. Let me just read a few of them out that people have asked concerning fasting. The obvious one is, how do I prepare for a fast? Where do you start? What do you have to do if you're going to go on a fast? And then what can you drink during a fast? I mean, normal water, yes, certainly, but what about tea? What about coffee? When do you sort of cross over the line if you have milkshakes or Bovril? Those kind of questions?
Yes, and these are all questions from viewers to us. How long should I fast for? And can I carry on working while I fast? Or do I have to go into a room and while I'm fasting just pray and not go out to work? And people were saying it's impossible for me. I've got to go to work. Can I fast?
And the big one must be, what about breakfast? I mean, all of us have been brought up to understand you must have breakfast. You've got to have your porridge or your cereal or your toast, whatever it is. What happens during a fast? Because you can't have breakfast.
Yes, and I'm pregnant.
Are you?
I'm pregnant. Is it all right to fast?
Yeah.
People asked.
That's right, and we tend to think of fasting as being good for people who are overweight, but what about people who are underweight?
Yes, so all these sort of questions we're going to answer, hopefully, as best as we can, in the next 3 programmes.
But we want to start today because we sent our cameras out into the high street and we asked people if they'd ever fasted and what they understood it was all about.
Do you know why people fast?
Some people fast to lose weight and others fast for religious reasons.
Do I know why people fast? I think it's to do with God and sort of being able to take your time out to sort of concentrate on Jesus and like religion and stuff.
Well, I think people fast because they're trying to obviously uphold their beliefs. Obviously, you get Muslims with, I can't remember the exact name of it, but they do it because obviously they want to fit in with their religion.
Do people fast, like, to sacrifice something that they love or enjoy, like for God?
To remember that Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to reject the temptation of Satan.
All the three main religions advocate that you must fast. Christianity, Islam and Judaism, and they all fast, but unfortunately, as you and I both know, Christianity, they just don't believe in their own religion anymore. They don't fast.
Do you know what detox problems are, and is detox good for you?
I know what detox is. I don't know that I feel it's good for you, really.
To my knowledge, I think detox is like cleansing your immune system.
I think detox programs are good, especially I've done it before.
Detox is really good for you. Yeah. Like, I think everyone needs to detox at some point during their time, especially if they drink or if they're a smoker.
Yeah.
Then time out to be healthy and maybe not eat as much.
It's like a period of relief.
Yeah.
I've heard detox, but I don't really know. It kind of sounds like Botox, I don't know.
Well, certainly some confusion there on the streets of Kingston as to what fasting is all about.
Did you hear him say detox? It sounds like Botox. It couldn't be more different.
It could not. But maybe some of you are folks who joined us in fasting. Maybe you've already done some period of fasting. Certainly lots of viewers joined in and fasted with us some 15 months ago. And I guess from that and the feedback that we got from people, we began to read as much as we could, couldn't we? Both books that had been written and really what the Bible had to say.
And you did loads more research than I did, Gordon.
That's right. And from that, I've now written a book which is entitled Not If, But When, a study of prayer and fasting. And really what we're sharing today and in the next two programmes are things that we discovered as we researched on fasting and prayer.
And there's no way we could cover everything in that one book, because as we were studying it, more and more things got thrown up as we were studying the subject of fasting and prayer. And I think in a way we need to balance it up with prayer as well as fasting.
Yes, we do. I suppose if you'd have asked me when I started, and maybe that's what many people at home are saying, I would have said there wasn't an awful lot in the Bible about fasting. But really, when you get in, there's so many occasions. And I think the problem has been that the Christian church, for some reason, particularly the latter half of the 19th century and most of the 20th century, completely ignored fasting. It was as if somehow they could read the Bible and skip over every reference to fasting.
Yeah, but I believe the enemy of our souls, in a way, had kept that tool hidden, because I think prayer and fasting is a dynamic tool when they go together.
That's right.
So prayer is a wonderful tool, but when fasting and prayer go together, it's a dynamic tool.
I remember reading, I've read lots of books over the past 12 months, but one book I read was Calvary Road. That's right, by Roy Hession. And Roy Hession in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s was a tremendous evangelist, one of the leading evangelists in the country. And so he was in every major evangelical movement at that time. Also, he went across to East Africa and experienced revival over there. And he came back and he spoke about brokenness and he spoke about repentance and the need for prayer in this country. Do you know, I read the whole book. There's not one mention of fasting in it.
But if you have, viewers, never read The Calvary Road by Roy Hession, and you can get hold of a copy, it is well worth reading. Back in the 60s, when Gordon and I were in Bible college, it was compulsory reading for every student, and I thank God that I read that book.
And so what we want to share with you today is that fasting, rather than being a forgotten subject or just for people who are on the fringes of things, fasting is right at the centre and should be at the centre of our Christian lives. So let's just start, Lorna,
Well, can we look at some scriptures?
Some scripture, that's right.
Yeah. We can't even read them all. I was just going to look at Matthew 6, if I may.
Yep, which is the chapter really that the book is based upon. Because here we are in the Sermon of the Mount, and Jesus is talking about all sorts of practical things, and then he turns to the subject of giving and praying and fasting, doesn't he?
Yes, and really your title of your book, Not If, But When, is based on these verses, isn't it?
That's right, because if you look in Matthew's Gospel and chapter 6 and verse 2, it talks about giving. It says, therefore, when you do a charitable deed. And then in verse 5, it talks about, and when you pray. And then when it gets down to verse 16, it says, moreover, when you fast. Right. And the point I was trying to get across was, if the Lord, who said those words, had used the word if, then he was saying something that was conditional. You know, you might do something, or you mightn't do something. You know, if a class has been unruly, and the teacher says to them, if you make a noise one more time, you'll stay in tonight, the class know they've got a choice. They can either be noisy, and they'll stay in, or they can be quiet, and they won't. But if a teacher says to a class, when the school bell goes tonight at 3:45, you're all going to stay behind, there's no choice about it. No. And that's what Jesus says.
So it is a definite thing, like that verse. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that you may get glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. So we've not to make a big song and dance about it when we fast.
But it's interesting, isn't it? We're very happy to give. Everyone accepts that a Christian should do that. We're very happy to pray. Christians all agree we should do that. But the third one there that Jesus puts in this chapter, we've ignored, fasting.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is it's got to come back into the mainstream and be part of the things that Christians, every Christian, should be doing.
And people will find the dynamite that it is in proving that God is a God of the breakthrough, because nothing builds your faith up like fasting, because the body goes down, because we're composed of body, soul and spirit, aren't we? And what happens is the body shrinks down and our spirits become alive with God's Holy Spirit within us, and that makes that dynamite where we see breakthroughs.
So our question to you today is, have you ever fasted? We went back onto the streets and that was a question that we asked some people in Kingston.
Have you ever fasted?
I fasted to lose weight, but that was a long time ago.
No, I thought about it, but the whole thought of going hungry, you know, I don't need to go hungry to understand that there's poverty in the world.
When I fasted, my mum wasn't well, and so I was fasting just so that I could get a little closer to God.
Have you ever fasted?
No. I like my food. I am a Christian. I do believe in Christianity. I wouldn't say I'm one of those typical churchgoers that goes every Sunday, but I do pray and I do pray to God, and I try my best to be a good person. So I think that's the most important thing.
I haven't fasted. I just don't think there's much point. I don't think anything's really achieved by it.
I fasted like around the time of my GCSEs. I gave up meat, because people told me that they'd done it and that it works. So
I fast regularly, 30 days every year.
What does the word breakfast mean?
Well, it means break fast after the night, but actually breakfast is very important. I couldn't do without mine.
I couldn't tell you, since I haven't had it in a couple of years.
I think it means like when you break your fast, maybe when you fast and then it's time to break your fast.
Really?
That's what I think, yeah.
I know, like, isn't the origin because...
It's just stopping the fasting.
Yeah, because when you sleep, you don't eat.
So welcome back to this programme where Lorna and I today are talking about fasting and prayer. Lorna, I guess we have to say, you know, where did we start in our fasting and journey?
Yeah, well, it started quite late in our lives, really. And I would say my journey into fasting, not prayer, but my journey into fasting was when we went to Trinidad to live for 6 months. Reinhardt Bonnke had done a crusade in Trinidad and left behind a young church of all these new believers. And so we went out to really nurture them in the faith.
That's right. And what we found was, although we thought we were going out there to teacher and to pastor, that the Christians in Trinidad were way ahead of us in some areas, weren't they?
Yes, so we taught the young believers, but we met so many other believers who were having a deeper walk with God than I'd had experienced. I'd always had a hunger and a thirst for God and the things of God, but this was a new dimension that I knew that I hadn't entered into, and it was the walk of prayer and fasting. It was really nothing to them in 1 year to have done a 40-day fast. It was very normal for the believers in Trinidad to have done that, and I saw in their lives an enthusiasm, faith that I long for, and I suppose I learned so much in that 6 months in Trinidad of the walk of fasting.
Yes, I think
we both did.
We did, and I think the whole lifestyle, I think the Western lifestyle makes it hard to fast.
It does.
We're surrounded by food, we're surrounded by adverts of food. You know, if you go out, the thing is to go to a restaurant or a cafe. In Trinidad, it's not like that at all. And they haven't got much money, therefore they haven't got much food, and they have a dependency on God that we haven't got. And because they've got such a hunger and a thirst for Him, then the physical hunger and thirst is not the same as it is in the Western world.
No, and I remember the intercessors that I met with, they gave me books of a man called Franklin Hall, and I really ate and studied those books, and they really put a fire in me to search the scriptures on fasting. So I would say that was our journey into fasting, really.
It was. I mean, I'd fasted as a child for Lent, because that was the thing you did if you went to church.
But majority people did that. They gave up chocolate.
That's right.
Or did something.
Or comic or whatever it was. And I can remember when we began to move into the things of the Spirit, I'd begun just a little. I remember once I was preaching on prophecy, and I was a bit scared of it. And so I fasted for 2 days, and then that was the Thursday and the Friday. And then the Saturday I thought, well, I'd better get my strength back up again. So I ate, and then I preached on the Sunday. And the thing about fasting is you do not know what impact it has, because it's not as if I will fast, therefore such and such answer will come.
Yeah.
All what you're doing is you're saying, Lord, you know, I'm totally dependent upon you, and I'm just seeking and hungering after you.
Yeah. I would say fasting is almost like a mystery. I think it deals with things in us. It brings us to a brokenness and a realization of ourselves before God, and really our rottenness before God. And so it does not change God, but we change. And I think as we change, our spirits get more alive with God's Spirit. So that means that we hear God much more, and we get a feeling of what is on His heart.
That's right. I hope you can sense we are having a delight in sharing with you about fasting, and we certainly believe in fasting and want to encourage you to consider fasting for yourself. I mean, Lorna, you've got something from, is it Smith and Wigglesworth there?
I just love Smith Wigglesworth. It builds my faith up when I read his book. And this is what he says: I know this as clearly as anything, that no man can change God. You cannot change him. There is a word in Finney's lectures which is very good. Can a man who is full of sin and all kinds of ruin in his life change God when he comes to pray and fast? No, it is impossible. But as a man labours in prayer and groans and travails, because his tremendous sin is weighing him down, he becomes broken in the presence of God. And when properly melted in the perfect harmony with the divine plan of God, then God can work in the clay. Where before he could not work, prayer changes hearts, but it never changes God.
That's right. We tend to think we'll pray and ask God, whereas what we're trying to do is, when we pray, get in tune with God. And as we get in tune with him, then we begin to see our prayer answering. And how do we get in tune with God? It's as we come humbly before him, fasting and praying.
Yeah,
together.
And there's nothing like just sacrificing yourself. Just flesh goes down, but it is not easy.
That's right. Well, it's one thing for us to talk about what the Bible has to say about fasting and the theology of fasting, but medically, that's one of the big questions that people worry about when they talk about fasting and prayer. And so we asked Dr. Laura Richardson last time that she was in if she'd answer some questions for us, particularly the kind of questions that viewers have been asking. And here she is talking and answering a question about breakfast. What about those people who've said, I've always been told I must have breakfast. You know, you've got to start the day, make sure you eat something to get all the bodily functions going. How can I give up breakfast?
Very easily, I would say, because we fast anyway between when we go to bed and when we get up. And so when we're asleep, we're actually fasting. We're not eating when we're asleep. So we usually fast from about 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. or whenever we get up, and when we have breakfast to 7. So we've already had a 12-hour fast. To extend that a little bit, i.e. missing breakfast, will do no harm to 99% of people. So if they skip breakfast and if they call that their fast, just not having breakfast, it's perfectly okay. There are a few people who may not be able to do that for medical reasons, but for majority of people, it shouldn't be a problem at all to miss breakfast.
So is there any truth to this idea you're supposed to eat breakfast, or is it really just what we call an old wives' story?
Eating breakfast is one of the best advices anybody could give a person. So it's actually a good thing to eat breakfast.
So what does it do?
Well, breakfast, because we have been fasting, as I said, if we've not had if the last meal was at 8 p.m. and we've had a 12-hour, 14-hour fast, depending on when we get up and when we go to bed, during that time, the body is actually still metabolizing, you're still breathing, your heart's still beating, so we're still using up energy. And we get, sometimes if we don't, if we're quite fit, we don't have lots of fat stores, we actually start to use up our glycogen stores, which is stored in the liver and the muscle. So by the time we come to breakfast, we need to actually replenish our energy stores. And we do that by having a good complex carbohydrate meal or a good protein-sourced meal. So breakfast is important because by the time we wake up, our blood sugar is low because we've been working throughout the night, and so it is good to actually start having a meal there. Otherwise, we can get hypoglycemic, and then what could happen is that then at lunchtime we have a binge and we eat anything that's going, whether it's chocolate, sweets, or what have you. So breakfast is a healthy meal, and it's a good meal to have under normal circumstances, yes.
But if you're fasting, you're not harming your body by not having it.
Not at all. You've got plenty of stores that you can really live on. The only thing is if you are an active person, for instance, if you have an active job like a builder, then it might be important to have breakfast because you would not be able to physically work without energy stores.
So there you are, the old wives' tale about you mustn't miss breakfast. True, but if you're in a fast, you don't have to do it. Lorna, we're coming towards the end of the programme. If we were going to give to viewers a challenge of a passage which maybe they could just ponder on as they think about fasting and praying, what would that be?
Well, one of my favourite books is Nehemiah, and if you look at chapter 1, verse 4, it says, and it's talking about Nehemiah, "So it was when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven." And that's because he knew Jerusalem was broken.
That's right. He was the cupbearer to the king, wasn't he? A long way out from Jerusalem, and some friends had come and shared with him the state of Jerusalem,
Exactly.
and it was a terrible state. And clearly wondered what to do. And so when he heard the words, he sat down, he wept, he mourned, and he fasted, and he prayed. And then the rest of the book, really, of Nehemiah, is the story of what happened as a result of that time of fasting and prayer.
Oh, yes. I mean, you could go on, and if you've never studied Nehemiah, study Nehemiah, because it is so exciting. And all the time you hear Nehemiah saying, oh, Lord, please be attentive to my prayer." Now, all through he says it, be attentive to my prayer.
Well, in the programme today, we've only been able to really touch on the subject of fasting and prayer, but we hope that you'll begin to say, Lord, are you speaking to me about fasting and prayer in my own life? And next week, same time, we're going to be back and we're going to be talking about how fasting isn't just from food, but there are many other different ways that you can fast and see God at work. We want to leave you today with a story that in 1756, the King of England, no less, called this nation to pray and to fast. John Wesley tells us that February the 6th was a glorious day. Churches in London were full, and that people prayed and fasted, and the threatened invasion by Napoleon and the French didn't happen. What a God we serve. It's time to begin fasting and praying.